Hello and welcome to my little trip down road testing memory lane. Another Q&A video for you today. Thanks very much for all your questions and comments as always. I do see them all. I make a point of liking every comment and then they go into a, just so you know I've seen them, then they go into a big stash and then I draw 5 or 6 out each time. So I will get to you, I promise, if you've sent something in. But I've been on my travels. I have been on another launch. I've been to Mallorca to ride the Triumph Speed Twin 1200, which is really nice. It's a Triumph sort of updated version of their big retro, which used to be kind of the kind of milder, more road focused version of their Thruxton. But now that the Thruxton's been discontinued, the Speed Twin is the only one that remains, but they do an RS version now with all the blingy chassis parts. So you can read all about that test in MCN online with both versions, the RS and the normal one. And then I've also done a little group test closer to home on local roads around here, and that was the BMW R1300 GS. We had a triple black example. Against the Tiger 1200 GT Pro. So both bikes are new for 24 and probably one of the most asked questions really when it comes to adventure bikes. You know, is the 1300 still the daddy with all its changes? The Tiger I lived with a couple of years ago and I love that bike. Even now I think it's probably one of the most comfortable touring bikes money can buy. So that was a really interesting test. So check that out in MCN soon. So let's crack on with some questions. And the first one is from S. Piasso. Dear Nevesy, it'd be nice if you shared some anecdotes about the Masterbike years with journos across Europe, Grimroder, Arnie Toad, etc. I remember seeing your name in lap time sheets alongside official riders' times on street bikes too. Greetings from Pamplona. Keep up the top work. Thanks very much for your question. I went to Pamplona a couple of years ago actually and thoroughly enjoyed it. Masterbike, for those of you that don't know, was a big event that was run by the Spanish motorcycle magazine Motociclismo or Motociclismo. Perhaps one of you Spanish viewers can pick me up on my pronunciation. And basically it was a massive, huge sports bikes test. You know, I joined them in the early 2000s when I joined MCN. I probably did 5 or 6 of them, and right when sports bikes were kind of at their most popular, you know, in their pomp really. So this Spanish magazine would assemble all of the sports bikes from that year in all the different categories. They would hire a track for 5 days, and then the winner of the test, when it was all done, would literally be the fastest bike really. And enabled them to do that, the manufacturers deemed this test so important that the manufacturers bought 2 of every bike along, and they brought along their factory test riders to set the bike up at that particular track with that year's particular control tyre. So it was properly serious. And then Motociclismo used to invite magazines from all over the world to take part. Now, because it was all based on speed and lap time, most magazines sent along not necessarily staff, but their kind of friendly racer, because it was all about lap times. For MCN, it was a little bit of a difficult one. It never really kind of fitted into place properly within what MCN does. So for example, you know, with all of these sports bikes, as soon as they came out each year, we would do group tests on the road and the track and come up with a winner. And that winner was determined on, you know, what it's like on the road, what it's like on the track, on all these different factors. And quite often the Masterbike winner was different to our group test winner. So it was kind of a test that we took part in. but we didn't sort of give it that much importance. It was more a little bit of fun. And, you know, back in those days, we could spare the staff. You know, they could quite easily pack me off to Spain for a week, and it wouldn't be such a big deal. Nowadays it would be, because we haven't got as much staff, or it's not as much money swilling around in the system. So I think my very first one was in Jerez. I did them at Catalonia and Valencia as well, and it was just incredible. You know, it was only a couple of years into me having this job, and I was proper starstruck. You know, not only was I being paid to go to a sunny racetrack for a week to ride all of these bikes, it was just full of heroes of mine. You know, Randy Mamola was there for a lot of them. Jürgen Fuchs, a lot of people I recognise from racing who had just recently retired from racing or was still racing. And I felt like a very small cog in a big machine. There was only really 2 or 3 actual journalists. Everyone else was racers. So, you know, as if I didn't have imposter syndrome enough by working at MCN, I'm suddenly thrust into this big competition. So really, I just kept my head down and kept myself to myself. And, you know, MCN was probably viewed as being pretty unimportant then. You know, the Spanish magazines, the Italian magazines were huge then, as was MCN. But yeah, I just remember a lot of the Spanish and Italian journalists used to sort of walk with their chest puffed out and were running the show. You know, they were getting their pictures first, they were getting their rides on their bikes first and all the rest of it, which was fine. So I took a couple of the Masterbikes out. I couldn't find the first one at Jerez, but the next one we did was Catalonia. So on this first page, you see we used to do all these ridiculous kind of tracking shots, group shots. And you can see there you've got all the bikes that are involved in Masterbike, all side by side along a track. So tracks aren't really that wide, and when you're squeezing in all these bikes, we were actually kind of riding elbow to elbow, which was a little bit dodgy. I think somebody fell off one time where they got their handlebars caught with other ones. But you can see here we've got a GSX-R 600, ZX6R Kawasaki, 749 Ducati, Yamaha R6, Aprilia RSV Factory, that'd be the old twin, Suzuki GSX-R 1000. When was this? This was 04, so yeah, that would be the K4. Honda Fireblade. So this was the year when all the thousands sort of took a step up. The GSX-R was always a year behind, wasn't it? It wasn't the year of the K5 at that point. Honda Fireblade, GSX-R 750, ZX10R, Ducati 999S, Benelli Tornado RS, Honda CBR 600RR, Yamaha R1. I mean, there's no bike apart from the Benelli over 10 grand. Oh, the Aprilia. I lie. There's a few of them. The Italian ones, the European ones, but all the Japanese ones are under 10 grand. So we probably spent, the factory test riders spent a day or two setting all the bikes up to be perfect in those conditions, to set the best lap time. And then we spent maybe a couple of days just doing pictures, just doing shots like this. So there was a lot of cornering shots, a lot of group shots, a lot of wheelie shots, a lot of burnout shots. It was just heaven. I remember one time we had to do a formation flying lap around Valencia, and I couldn't keep up with everyone. Everyone was going slow. That's how fast everyone was, which is a bit embarrassing. And then, so really, like I said, the test didn't really fit in with what MCN did. So we kind of laid it out as a competition, as you know, as kind of almost like a race meeting. So we've described how it works. All the bikes were dyno tested. The categories were Super Sport, which were all the 600s and the Ducati 749R. Superbike, which was the 1000cc twins, 900c triples, and 750cc fours. And then an open class, which was the 1000cc fours. Well, that's interesting. We called Superbikes the 1000cc twins and 750s. Then we had all the different testers. We had all the setup and the tests. And for each bike, we talked about its lap time, the settings that were dialed in for the track. Really interesting. The testers on this one, we had myself, Sam McLaughlin from Aussie MCN, Marcus Lehner from Switzerland, who was a racer, worked for Toff magazine. Barry Veneman, he's a Dutch Supersport champion, a World Supersport runner and X500 Grand Prix. Don Canet from America, he's an American journalist who's really, really fast. Kei Nashimoto from Japan, Suzuka 8-hour racer. Krista Lindholm, Swedish Superbike champ, German Superbike champ, World Superbike racer. Nuno Oliveira, Supersport racer from Portugal. Rafael Pascalin from Brazil. He's a Brazilian Superbike racer now. Oriol Fernandes, Supersport champion. Gabor Tamashi, 125 racer. Thomas Bayard, who's Moto Journal. He did 24-hour Le Mans. Andreas Bildi, Supersport racer, journalist. Marcus Barth, Supersport champion. Claudio Corsetti runs race school. So it was pretty serious going. So let's tell you the results for the 2004. So the ZX10 one, it did the fastest time. So that won that class. So that would have been at odds with our group test winner that year, which would have been the R1, because the R1 was kind of the best all-round superbike. Momola was doing some lurid power slides on that ZX10 out of corners, which was fantastic. In second place was the winner of that kind of what they called a superbike class then. I guess we call it middleweight now. That was a GSX-R 750. So the quickest time was 1:55.2 with the ZX10, and the GSX-R 750 was only 0.5 behind, 1:55.7. And then the Kawasaki was the best Supersport bike, 1:56.1, which again would have been at odds with our group test winner, which would have been the CBR 600RR, just because it was a better all-round road bike. So that was 2004. Let's have a quick look at the 2005 one, which was in Jerez. So again, we've got this explanation of how the test was set up. This is a year where you've got the GSX-R 1000 K5 in this one, and a few other new bikes. Same kind of array of racers. Anyone different in there? We had Brian Catterson from Cycle World, Zef Enel from Motor Journal. It was just incredible. So let's see who won the Supersport. It was the Kawasaki ZX6 again, so that stayed on top. The Maxi Sport, they're calling it now, was the Ducati 999S, which beat the RSV4 factory in the GSX-R 750. And then the outright winner again was the ZX10R. So again, that would have been at odds with our group test winner that year, which is the GSX-R 1000 K5, the iconic bike. So yeah, there were great days. I mean, unfortunately now, Motociclismo is a shadow of its former self, because it just kind of bombed in popularity over the years. I mean, MCM, we've been lucky that we've managed to keep selling issues, and remaining pretty. The sales are pretty good still. In these kind of tough times for print media. But yeah, some of the Spanish and the Italian magazines haven't fared so well. But they were amazing times. But yeah, it was always I always kind of got the impression that MCN just kind of let me go to this thing to keep me quiet. I don't really think that those tests had any value for the reader, because pure lap times don't tell the story of a bike. It's just a bit of fun really, but those guys treated it really, really seriously. So yeah, that was proper little walk down memory lane. But thanks very much for your question. Next one is from David J. Loveland 3673. Hello, David. A question about all the millions of air miles that you've travelled to and from motorcycle launches over the years. Have you had any or many bad experiences while out and about on your travels? Thanks for the question. I mean, yeah, I've been doing this over 22 years now. And yeah, I suppose I've been doing launches every year. I've done hundreds of launches now. I mean, touch wood, nothing really bad has happened. I've only crashed at one launch in all that time, which was in 2011, which was the launch of the Aprilia RSV APRC Biaggi Rep. So that was the first time, well, it might have been end of 2010. That was the first time the RSV4 got all its electronics, because when it was first launched in 09, it didn't have any electronics. And I crashed at Jerez at turn, the slow right in the stadium section. I can't remember what it's called now, but I lost the front. And because it's a launch, there aren't any marshals around. So I had to basically stand in the gravel next to my stricken bike and wait for the session to finish, feeling a little bit stupid. But yeah, that was just a little spill. The other kind of foreign spills I've had, which have affected work, which have been done when I've been racing, in 2017, we were doing some pre-season testing on my S1000R Valencia. Had a really good first day test. It was really fast. We had a brand new bike that my friend Bob had built. It was absolutely immaculate and was so keen to get out on track. We went out on track the minute it opened on day 2, and which was about 9 o'clock, and it was about February time, I think. And at that time of the year, it's only just got light, and a lot of Valencia is still in the shadow of the grandstands, and of course very cold. And as you always hear in the commentary, turn 4 of Valencia is the first right-hander you get to, because it's a anti-clockwise track, and that's where all the crashes are. And I had a big high side going into the corner. I had a cold high side from the rear going in, so I tipped it in. As I tipped it in, the rear came round, threw me over the top, slammed me on the floor, and I broke my pelvis, and which was pretty painful. So I ended up going to the circuit medical centre, getting some morphine shots. One of my friends then drove me to the A&E in Valencia while I got checked out, which was really painful. Then when I got checked out, it was a crack down my pelvic bone. It hasn't actually come adrift, luckily. So I was able to leave that day, but we had to go to a shop in town to buy some crutches. Then I had to get the plane home, and then the following day I was supposed to be on the launch of the Yamaha MT10 SP and Yamaha T-Max, which was in South Africa. So the original plan was to get a hotel in the airport at Gatwick, come back from my racing jaunt, and then go straight to the launch. But that didn't happen, unfortunately. So I missed out on that launch and just had to go home. But yeah, that was painful. And then I suppose the other one was crashing at Phillip Island for the Island Classic in 2020. I had a collision with Marty Craggle on the last lap of a race. We were battling for the lead. He was on a TZ750. I was on Carl Cox's XR69. And yeah, we were fast at different places in the track. He was more nimble through the corners. My bike was faster down the straights. And then we collided. I broke 2 bones in my hand. The next weekend, I was testing the new Fireblade in Qatar. So I had to go to A&E from Phillip Island, had my hand in a cast. Halfway through that week, just before I flew to Qatar, I cut the cast off. I had to go on a couple of Carl's road bikes just to see if I could ride. The first time I tried, I couldn't. The second time I tried, I could just about put the weight of my hand on the handlebar and pull the clutch in with my whole arm. And I thought, well, that'll have to do. But my hand had just swollen up like a big bloody beef joint. It was, I could barely get my glove on. So I flew to Qatar and managed to do the launch of the blade, but it was really painful. I couldn't really ride properly, to be honest. I could do all the right hand as well, but when it came to going around left-handers, you don't realise that as you're going through the left, how much pressure you put on your left hand and how much counter steering you need. And also when you're going from left to right, you're using your legs to get you across the bike, but you're also pushing and pulling on the bars, so that was pretty painful. And then a week after that, it was the launch of the ZH2 in Las Vegas. So yeah, that was a run of what should have been dream rides, dream racing experiences, but it was kind of marred by a broken hand. And I've had one aborted landing in a plane where we go to land and then it takes off again. But given all those air miles, nothing too drastic has happened, touch wood. But thanks very much for your question, David. Right, next is from New Zero Land. Man, thanks so much for making these videos, no problem. What are your thoughts on electric motorcycles? I've been riding Zeros and Ajikas for years, but I'm curious how you feel they compare to petrol bikes and where you think the future of motorcycling will go. Well, I take it by your name, you love a Zero. But yeah, I'd say some electric bikes are really nice to ride. So the Energicas, I think, are great. I think the best big capacity equivalent electric bikes are made by Livewire. You know, the original Livewire, the kind of the cruisery shaped one, the Del Mar, which is more of a Ducati Monster shaped one. They're actually great bikes to ride. They handle well, they stop well. You know, they're a sister sort of company to Harley Davidson, and they're probably the best handling Harleys you can buy. Certainly the smoothest. Electric bikes have just got beautiful power delivery, the same sort of power delivery everyone's searching for from a petrol engine. Nice smooth torque, nice throttle response. It's very easy to understand and control. Really strong acceleration. I mean, these things accelerate so hard with no gears. It's just one relentless force of acceleration. And after a while, it actually makes you feel a bit seasick. You know, at least with a petrol engine with gears, you've got a bit of a break in between gears just to kind of get your breath back. But electric bikes are just whoosh. But the disadvantages obviously are the ones we all know about. They're very heavy, although the Del Mar's not too bad. And it's the whole charging thing and the amount of time they take to charge, which, you know, we all know about. You know, you're transferring your pollution problem from one place to another, because while you've got a nice clean motorcycle in your nice clean city full of electric vehicles, there's some pollution being pumped out in a power station somewhere, and the problems attached to creating the batteries in the first place that we all know about. So I honestly don't think that big capacity equivalent electric bikes really have got a future, you know, when it comes to leisure bikes. And of course, poor old Energica have gone bust now, probably as a result of that. But where I think electric bikes are really, really good is when it comes to 125cc equivalents. So we tested a Maving RM1S recently, the BMW CE04. I mean, to nip around town, I mean, they're expensive, that's the only problem. But to ride around town, they're much better than a 125. They're much smoother, much quieter, less heat comes off them in hot weather. And, you know, when you've got a 125 petrol bike, you don't really need the excitement of gears or the involvement of an engine and all the rest of it. You just want to get from A to B. And if you've got an electric bike, if you can charge it at home or the office, I think it's a bit of a no-brainer. You know, if London was full of more electric bikes, it would cut down on all the congestion and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I think it's hard to say where the future of motorcycling is going to go. You know, hybrids, Kawasaki are experimenting with it, aren't they? But, you know, the one that they've got at the moment is very much a toe in the water. It's not brilliant. Hydrogen, obviously, Kawasaki again showed a hydrogen bike, didn't they, at the Suzuka 8 Hour, which what looked like rocket launchers on the side of it for the hydrogen tanks, which doesn't actually get it very far. So that's kind of, you know, fly in the sky or pie in the sky in the future. It's very hard to know where it's all going. The emissions restrictions are getting tighter and tighter. But at the moment, I think we're just hanging on to the petrol engine, aren't we? And let's enjoy it for as long as we can, I'd say. But yeah, it's a shame the big electric bikes have got so much going against them, because to ride, they're actually not too bad. And you all know how much I love a T-Max. I think an electric T-Max would be amazing. but you probably wouldn't have any storage space because all the storage space would be taken up with batteries like it is on the BMW S1000R. But yeah, interesting. What do you all think of electric bikes? Keep it clean though. Thanks very much. Right, next from HKS071. I love these videos. Thank you very much. Can you tell us some tips on riding in the rain? I'm somehow terrified to lean on the wet. Thank you. Well, number one, don't lean over in the wet. But I'll come to that. I suppose, you know, I've done a lot of wet riding. We've been testing this week in the wet on the road. Done a lot of wet racing. Inexplicably, I always used to do well in the wet. You know, I used to pray for the weather gods, and I used to win a lot of wet races. I don't know why, I don't know how. It's just one of those things. In more recent times, I haven't been so great in the wet, but you know, for the latter parts, not so good, but for the most part of my racing career, I did pretty well. So I suppose the big one is to be smooth, all your inputs on the bike is to be very, very smooth. So very smooth on the throttle, no jerky throttle movements, and wait before you get on the throttle. Just pick up the throttle, let the weight transfer to the rear of the bike so it's dug in before you accelerate. The same goes for braking, really smooth braking transition. So brake smoothly at first to let the weight transfer onto the front tyre before you squeeze the brakes more. A bit of body position is quite good. On the track, you want to hang off a lot because you want to keep the bike as upright as you can. But even on the road, it's a really good idea just to sort of just bend your inside arm and just lean your head and shoulders off the bike a little bit, just to stop it leaning over. You know, the big thing there, which is what you've opened with, is you don't want to lean it over, and you don't want to lean a bike over in the wet. Okay, it's a little bit different on track when you've got proper wet tyres. If you've got a grippy track, you can get your knee down in the wet, but you'll never lean as far as you would have done in the dry. On the road, distribute the braking more evenly between the front and the back, so I use a lot more rear. Not so much on the track because it's easy to lose the rear. If you've got a lot of weight transfer on the front, you haven't got much grip on the rear, so you can just use a little bit of rear brake. But on the road, I'm probably 50-50 on the brake. Tyres are another thing. You know, you're never going to be able to lean over in the wet if you've got the wrong tyres. So for the road, sports touring tyres are the best in the wet, obviously. They use compounds that warm up really fast. They've got deeper grooves to get rid of the water. And they've got a lot of silica in the compound, which helps them, the chemical grip in the wet. And then the kind of stickier and more racy the tyre, the worse it is in the wet. It just doesn't like to lean. And you can kind of really feel that. If you feel like the bike is really reluctant to turn, then you know you're running out of front grip. That's kind of how you feel for front grip, is the turning. You feel for rear grip with the tyre slipping. Obviously you can't do that on the front. So that's a telltale sign. When the bike becomes really difficult to turn, you haven't got much grip. When it's really easy, really light steering, you've got lots of front grip. Make sure tyre pressures are good. If you run them too low, you don't want the grooves closing up and they can't get rid of the water. And going back to the leaning thing again, to try and lean as little as you can, is not to do big sweeping U-lines through corners. So I always try to make more V-lines out of corners. So you're braking, pointing into a corner, but with the bike still upright, and get into a really low mid-corner speed and just turning the bike gently to where you want to go, and then off you go. You know, that's a good tip for any time where you've got kind of low grip conditions. You don't want to be leaning on the front tyre for too long with too much lean. You know, V-lines are much better. And yeah, so, and really, you know, you've got nothing to gain by going fast in the wet. You know, if it's a wet track day, I don't even bother going out, because the difference between staying on and coming off is just, it's 1 minute you're on, 1 minute you're off. There's no grey area like there is in the dry, where the bike starts to move. On the road, there's no massive benefit to going fast in the wet. It's just all about, you know, be safe, just ride to the conditions. The only time really you've got to go fast in the wet is in a race. And you know, even though I was good in the wet, I never really used to enjoy it, and I could never bring myself to go fast in the wet when it didn't matter in practice or qualifying. You know, you basically take your brain out when it's race time, and you ride to the conditions and to how fast everyone else is going. You know, you just want to go a little bit faster than that other person rather than just try and clear off into the distance. So, you know, if I had to just say one thing, be slow and be smooth, and don't worry about your speed. But interesting question. Thank you very much. Next is from Terence View. I come to you to hear the real motorcycle news, Michael. No goofing around, just the right information. Keep it up. Thank you very much. Okay, so my question is, I bought a Husqvarna TR650, my first semi-off-road bike, and find that I feel more and more confidence from the front wheel moving around, which scared me at first, as on the road that's a sign you push too far. Do you ride trail as well? I'm enjoying my ride so far, but there's a compromise when it comes to scratching on the road. Not sure yet if it's me. Do you think if you grew up mainly on road, you will never find that true confidence off-road? Well, interesting question. Thank you very much. I mean, all those dual purpose bikes, really, they're not born tarmac scratchers. Dual purpose tyres, off-road tyres, move around a lot on the road. You know, if you're feeling the front moving around, then yeah, they walk a lot through corners where, you know, the knobbles are more unstable than a more road focused tyre. There's less rubber on the ground, so there's less grip. They're not as good in the wet. So yeah, it's just a question of taking it a bit easy. And it's a bit like riding in the wet when you've got, you know, big knobblies on the road. It's all about staying in the corner for as little time as possible. So more V lines really. But you know, if you're enjoying that feeling of the bike being loose, then that's impressive. And obviously that's come from you riding off-road. I ride occasionally off-road. I mean, adventure bike launches now contain more and more off-road riding, you know, for the big adventure bikes, which I don't really enjoy. You know, I like smaller off-road bikes. I had a WR250 as a year for a long-termer ages ago, did a couple of hare and hounds on it. I don't mind the small stuff, but I don't really feel that confident on big enduro bikes. And it's ironic, we ride these Multistradas and GSs and stuff off-road, but I mean, how many owners actually do that? And quite often I take a step back from a launch invite if there's going to be a lot of off-road. And Michael Guy, one of our guys at MCN, sports reporter, fantastic off-roader, does all the heavy duty stuff. So does Carl Stevens, he really enjoys off-road, and Chris Newbiggin. But the irony is I miss out on experiencing these bikes as road bikes. So there's sort of a little gap in my knowledge for a lot of these big adventure bikes because the launches are so hardcore when it comes to off-road riding. I do enjoy it, and but I just don't get to do it enough. I wish I'd love an enduro bike, and if I had a group of friends near where I lived and somewhere to go, then I probably would do it a little bit more often, because it's a really good way to stay bike fit, isn't it? And gives you something fun to do over the winter as well. But yeah, I would say that with your bike, just ride it carefully on the road. Don't do too much scratching. If you want to scratch it, maybe put some Supermoto wheels and tyres on it. That'll give you some grip. But thanks very much for your question. And finally, if you're still with us, is from Nuna Bidness. Nevesy, if you like the bike so much, and he's talking about the BMW S1000R, that was in last week's video, where I found my old bike. Why haven't you made room in your life for one? I get that there are practicalities that dictate many of our motorcycle decisions. But if you know the bike works so well for you, isn't it a no-brainer to get another one? Used values can't be that high on them. That is an interesting point that you raise. I totally agree. I think the S1000R is a fantastic bike. It does everything. You know, if that was the only bike I had, I'd be more than happy with it, because I could do track days on it. I've done lots of touring on them. They're fine on long distance. Stick a tank bag on. They're fine. I've been to Ibiza, all around Europe on S1000Rs, Nürburgring, Scotland, Wales, all sorts. But the thing is, my job, because I ride so much, I couldn't really see myself owning a bike like that because I don't think I'd ever really use it, which is why the bikes I really like, you know, the ones I'd actually buy are bikes that are completely different to the ones I ride every day. So that's why I bought a GSXR 750, because there's absolutely nothing like that I ride anymore. There's no screaming 4-cylinder 750cc sports bikes anymore. So every time I ride that 750, it's a really unique experience. It's something I don't get anywhere else, which is quite sad. And the same goes with my T-Max. I really love that because it's like nothing else I ride. I mean, today I was riding a GS and I jumped straight on my GS to the T-Max, and it was just fun. I just liked it because it was so different. I mean, the T-Max felt like a Honda Melody 50 after the GS. And also there's this whole thing with the scooters, as we've spoken before, about, you know, not being real bikes. But the experience I had on my T-Max riding home was largely the same as I had on the GS riding to work. The only difference was I didn't change gear. And for most of the journey on the GS, I was in the same gear anyway. So I still can't get my head around why scooters aren't real bikes, because they just offer the same experience. It's just different. A scooter is as different to a GS as a GS is as different to an MT-07. You know, it's just, you know, but I understand why. It's a style of bike, isn't it? But coming back to your question, I couldn't have an S1000R in my life. I couldn't even have a Tuono in my life, which is my favourite super naked, just because it's too similar to what I ride every day. I'd like to get another bike in my garage, which I'm kind of half thinking about. And again, it's like nothing else that you'd ever ride now. So they're the kind of bikes that interest me. Having said that, once this whole road testing dream ends one day, and I'm sure it will, I'll want a super naked. I'll want kind of a sporty bike. So yeah, absolutely. I'd probably consider an S1000R or a Tuono, or that KTM 1390 Super Duke R Evo that I had. But I mean, that's really, really expensive. So that's why I don't really kind of own kind of modern bikes like that, really, I suppose, or conventional bikes, is just because I want something so different. But there you go. That is the end of this week's Q&A. Got another Q&A next week, and then after that is one of my annual road test diaries. So stay tuned for those. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.